Voice to the World, I'm Lipak Shikurana, coming up in the next 30 minutes. UN calls killings of civilians in both Gaza and Israel horrific. UN chief says case for humanitarian ceasefire becomes more urgent with every passing hour. US President Biden talks to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, says imperative to protect civilians in the course of military operations. Netanyahu terms it as a global battle against the axis of terror.
This is not a local battle. This is a global battle. The paramount need is to defeat this axis.
Ukraine says focus is on Black Sea grain deal alternatives day after attack on Odessa port. As war drags on, EU officials eye talks starting next year with Ukraine and Moldova. And Iga Swiatek returns to world #1 with WTA finals win over Jessica Pegula. And on to details now. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict, describing the situation in Gaza. Guterres emphasized the need for a humanitarian ceasefire and increased aid to Gaza, stating that the crisis is not just a humanitarian one, but crisis of humanity. He also launched a $1.2 billion UN humanitarian appeal to assist Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Guterres condemned the violations of international humanitarian law and urged all parties to respect their obligations.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day. More journalists have reportedly been killed over a 4-week period than in any conflict in at least 3 decades. More United Nations aid workers have been killed than in any comparable period in the history of our organization. Today, the United Nations and our partners are launching a $1.2 billion humanitarian appeal to help 2.7 million people. That's the entire population of the Gaza Strip and 500,000 Palestinians in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem.
Well, U.S. President Joe Biden and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday discussed the potential for humanitarian ceasefire in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. White House, in a statement, said that the two leaders discussed the possibility of tactical pauses to provide civilians with opportunities to safely depart from areas of ongoing fighting, to ensure assistance in reaching civilians in need, and to enable potential hostage release. The U.S. president reiterated his steadfast support for Israel and the protection of Israeli citizens from Hamas and all other threats, while also emphasizing the imperative to protect civilians and reduce civilian harm in the course of military operations. Also, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday said Israel was engaged in a global battle against an axis of terror led by Iran. Talking to a group of foreign ambassadors in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu warned that the battle being waged by Israel against the barbaric Hamas terrorists in Gaza is one that could threaten Europe next.
The barbarism is led by an axis of terror. The axis of terror is led by Iran. It includes Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and their other minions. They seek to bring the Middle East and the world back to a dark age. They seek to torpedo, to derail any progress towards peace and the progress and the promise that we had in our budding peace treaties with our Arab neighbors. If they go strong, if they're not defeated, they will derail this process. They will imperil the entire Middle East. If the Middle East falls to the axis of terror, Europe will be next, and no one will be safe. This is not a local battle. This is a global battle. The paramount need is to defeat this axis. That battle is now being waged by us against Hamas in Gaza. There is no substitute for victory. We will defeat Hamas. We will dismantle Hamas.
Meanwhile, also Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said Israel has allowed tactical little pauses. In a U.S. interview on Sunday, Netanyahu said that he anticipates Israel will have the overall security responsibility in Gaza after the war ends.
Well, there will be no ceasefire, general ceasefire in Gaza without the release of our hostages. As far as tactical little pauses, an hour here, an hour there, we've had them before. I suppose we'll check the circumstances in order to enable goods, humanitarian goods to come in, or our hostages, individual hostages to leave. But I don't think there's going to be a general ceasefire. It's not that I don't think. I think it will hamper the war effort. It'll hamper our effort to get our hostages out.
Well, as we told you, how diplomatic efforts are intensifying to urge humanitarian pauses and avert a spreading of conflict, our correspondent Amritpal Singh joins from Israel to tell us more.
Well, Antony Blinken had his task cut. He had come with a message from President Biden calling for a humanitarian pause. When he met Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet, they told him point blank that there is no question of a humanitarian pause. In fact, after Antony Blinken went to Jordan and later to Ankara, Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement and told his troops that get the word ceasefire out of your lexicon. We have a two-stated objective. One, finish Hamas completely. Second, get our hostages back. And we believe military campaign is the only way that will force Hamas's hands to get our hostages back. And also the objective is to completely politically and militarily finish off Hamas. And they have stepped up military campaign to achieve those objectives. Now, so as far as humanitarian pause, no, Antony Blinken did not achieve much. When he met the Arabs told him there has to be an unconditional ceasefire. The Israelis are saying unless hostages are released, there will be no ceasefire. So both sides are, on keeping or maintaining their maximalist positions. And on the front of preventing a regional escalation, though de-escalation is not happening, but escalation, Hezbollah is constantly firing, rockets into Israel. Hamas is firing rockets into Israel. Israel is responding back. But yes, till now, the diplomacy has been successful, that it hasn't grown into a full-blown regional escalation where Jordan comes in, Egypt comes in, or, Lebanese army gets sucked in, or the Syrian forces get sucked in. So in that sense, it is limited conflict primarily between Israel and Hamas. And it has, one could say that not just the US diplomacy, but other countries. The French foreign minister was in Tehran. The Indian prime minister spoke with the Iranian leadership. So clearly that has been at least able to see that the conflict, if is not de-escalating, is not escalating as well in terms of regional spillover.
All right, at least one person was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Al-Shifa hospital complex on Monday in Gaza. The strike has also left several injured. Denying the allegations of the attack, Israeli spokesman further said that they did not deliberately attack solar power panels on the roof of a Gaza hospital.
למיטב ידיעתי בלוחות סולאריים בבית החולים שיפה, אבל אנחנו עוקבים אחרי האופן שבו חמאס עושה שימוש ציני במתקנים הומניטריים, והאופן שבו חמאס עושה שימוש ציני בניצול אנרגיה של מתקנים.
Also, the United States on Monday condemned as wholly unacceptable comments by a junior member of the Israeli cabinet who appeared to voice openness to the idea of Israel carrying out a nuclear strike on Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday disciplined the cabinet member in question.
A ceasefire right now would not prevent Hamas from continuing terror attacks and firing rocket attacks at Israel in the future. And on the contrary, it would let Hamas off the hook, allow Hamas enough time to regroup, and we can't allow that. And no nation can be expected to tolerate those kinds of conditions. But one thing we have been very clear about, both the Secretary and the President, have been the need for a humanitarian pause to enable a sustained flow of aid and voluntary movement of civilians seeking to depart. And we continue to believe that it is important for all sides of this conflict to refrain from hateful rhetoric that is going to further incite tensions.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news with a focus on Israel-Hamas conflict. As several countries recall their diplomats from Israel while its conflict with Hamas rages on, South Africa has recently joined the list. The African country said on Monday that it was normal practice and that South Africa planned to assess its relationship with Israel amid a rise in civilian casualties due to the conflict. Combating attacks from Lebanon front, Israel's military targeted Shiite terrorist group Hezbollah on Monday, releasing a video showing two aerial views of targets being hit. IDF spokesperson said that the military will continue to have a significant response every time Israel is attacked. The retaliation came after a large barrage of rockets were fired at northern Israeli cities by the terrorist group earlier. In a display of solidarity, the walls of Jerusalem's old city were lit with photos of hostages held by Hamas. The faces of more than 200 Israeli hostages held by Hamas were projected onto the walls of Jerusalem's old city on the eve of 1-month anniversary of October 7th Hamas assault into Israel. 1,400 candles were lit at Jerusalem's Western Wall in tribute to the 1,400 victims of the Hamas-led terror attacks on October 7 this year. Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz was among the participants. In Tel Aviv, another vigil took place in Habima Square, where tens of empty beds were presented in memory of hostages in the Gaza Strip. The event marked 1 month of the Hamas attacks and commemorated the victims' sacrifices. Participants were seen sitting on beds, listening to singing and reading excerpts. And updates now on Russia-Ukraine war. Ukraine's foreign minister said Ukraine would focus on alternatives to the Black Sea Grain Initiative on Monday. Speaking at a press briefing in South Africa, Dmytro Kuleba said he didn't see any encouraging indicators about the revival of the grain deal and Ukraine would increase exports through European land routes.
We focused on two alternatives. The first one is increasing the capacity, increasing export capacity by land routes through Europe. We see the biggest potential in the route that will take our grain to ports in Romania, Bulgaria through the territory of Romania.
Well, as the war drags on, EU officials eye talks starting next year with Ukraine and Moldova. The European Union executive will recommend the bloc open membership negotiations with Kyiv once it meets outstanding conditions on Wednesday. A senior Ukrainian government minister said Kyiv expected the European Union to provide a positive appraisal of its progress on the path to membership in a report this week. Meanwhile, the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, Olha Stefanishyna, said everything which has been agreed has been implemented and done in 7 steps assessment.
I think that for purposes of the assessment, when it comes to the 7 steps, everything which has been agreed has been implemented and done. Well, I would say that the assessment would definitely be positive because we have been in a permanent contact with the European Commission, discussing the steps and negotiating on the steps we've managed to implement. We were following the recommendations from the colleagues. We were listening to the opinions of the member states.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news across the globe. Hundreds of Madrid residents protested against a potential amnesty for those involved in Catalonia's failed 2017 independence bid. The protest took place outside the party headquarters of acting Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who is struggling to form a government after an inconclusive election. The amnesty, pending crucial Puigdemont's Junts party negotiations, has sparked a political storm in Spain. Mark Gauthier, a Parkinson's patient, received a Swiss-designed implant to improve his mobility. The device, designed by Onward Medical, uses an electrode field against his spinal cord and an electric impulse generator to stimulate his leg muscles. The device is unique in its ability to target the spinal cord in a specific and flexible way. Northern Lights, or Aurora Borealis, were captured in Mohis City, China, turning the night sky pink and green. The spectacle occurred after a G3 geomagnetic storm spanning from Sunday night to early Monday morning. Aurora Borealis is caused by electrically charged particles colliding with atoms and molecules in the atmosphere. Mohis, the northernmost Chinese city, has been a popular destination for photography enthusiasts since the start of this year. Well, the Aurora Borealis, also known as the Northern Lights, illuminated the sky in the Italian region of Veneto. A time-lapse video taken from a webcam at Refugio Città di Capi revealed a brightly colored sky. Collisions between electrically charged particles from the sun and particles in Earth's atmosphere caused the phenomena. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Top diplomats of Group of 7 nations to start talks in Tokyo. Talks to focus on Israel-Hamas conflict and China's increasing maritime activities. Trump testifies in civil fraud case at New York court, calls the trial real election interference. And in the Cricket World Cup, Australia will clash with Afghanistan today. Both teams play on the back of victories in the last games.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers.
Watch Changemakers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lepakshi Khurana. And moving on, top diplomats of the Group of 7 nations start 2 days of talks in Tokyo from Tuesday, the first such gathering since the Hamas attack on Israel. G7 leaders are expected to exchange views on the conflict as well as China's increasing maritime activities. Japan will host its second G7 foreign ministers meeting this year after the one in April. Japan also chaired the September meeting in New York. Japan condemns the terrorist attacks by terrorist group Hamas. It plans to convey its call for a humanitarian pause as the Gaza district is on the verge of a serious crisis. It is expected to express that securing an environment which allows support activities is important. And moving on, Donald Trump has called a civil fraud case in New York election interference during his testimony. The former president of the United States clashed with Judge Arthur Engoron on Monday in the Manhattan courthouse. Trump is accused of inflating his wealth to secure better loans from banks. If he loses, he could be banned from doing business in his home state. Sally Patterson reports from New York.
Judge Engoron has already found Donald Trump, his adult sons and some of his inner circle at the Trump Organization liable for fraud. Now he's trying to determine what damages the former president should have to pay. New York Attorney General Letitia James is also seeking to cancel Trump's business licenses in her state. And that could lose him many of his companies, including Trump Tower behind me. Donald Trump is accused of stating his apartment here was 3 times bigger than it really was. Similarly, prosecutors say his Mar-a-Lago resort in the U.S. state of Florida is worth somewhere between $8 and $27 million.
They had no idea what the numbers were when they said $18 million for Mar-a-Lago, and it's 50 to 100 times that amount by any estimation.
Trump said it was worth more than $400 million. Trump and his sons, who testified themselves last week, have sought to shift the blame onto their accountants. They say that banks should have verified their financial statements themselves rather than just relying on what was given to them. Trump also claims, as he does with several other cases he's facing across the United States, that the proceedings are politically motivated and designed to keep him out of the White House. He's running for president in 2024. Now, taking to social media on Monday, Trump called the case one of the many that's been instigated and brought by his political opponents, quote, crooked Joe Biden, for purposes of election interference. Speaking outside the court, Trump's lawyer, Alina Haber, she called Donald Trump one of the best presidents America's ever had, who has built a great company. She said that it's actually worth far more than the statements suggested, not less. She stated that the country is falling apart and called for an end to corruption in courtrooms, where attorneys, she said, are being gagged. Now, that comes after the lawyer was told to sit down by the judge in the courtroom, who also demanded Donald Trump actually answer the questions being put to him rather than making long and at times rambling statements. This is a courtroom, he said, not a political rally. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
Well, Britain's King Charles will deliver his first King's speech today as he outlines the government's policy agenda for the coming session of Parliament. He's expected to announce proposals for new oil and gas licenses as well as changes to criminal justice and housing. Julia Chapman reports from London.
This will be the first state opening of Parliament since the death of Queen Elizabeth II. A year and a half ago, Charles, then the Prince of Wales, delivered the Queen's speech on his mother's behalf. But this is his first King's speech since becoming monarch. It's also the first for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who came to power a little over a year ago and whose legislative agenda will be laid out by the King in Parliament. Criminal justice is expected to feature heavily, with legislation expected to be proposed on introducing tougher sentences for rape and other serious crimes. The speech will set out plans to rent places in prisons outside the country and to require convicted criminals to attend their sentencing hearings. Other areas are likely to include a staggered smoking ban, reform of the leasehold housing system, and a possible new football regulator. Although he's unlikely to betray any unease, there is one policy that could be difficult for environmentalist King Charles to announce. That is a plan to introduce annual auctions for oil and gas extraction licenses. Ministers say that will ensure jobs are maintained and that Britain has secure energy supplies. But critics say the government is backsliding on environmental commitments. The policies unveiled on Tuesday will set the tone for the ruling Conservative Party in the coming year and pave the way for the next party manifesto ahead of an expected general election. Julia Chapman in London, reporting for DD India.
Well, another earthquake hit Nepal on Monday soon after search and rescue operations ended for the 6.4 magnitude earthquake that hit the region on 3rd of November. The focus has shifted to providing essential aid such as food, shelter and medical care to the survivors. The disaster has caused at least 157 casualties and left more than 200 people injured. 16,570 houses have been destroyed due to the earthquake in Rikhum Paschim district of Nepal. This number might increase as data collection is still underway in the district. The highest number of houses have been damaged in Arthbiskot municipality of the Rikhum West district of Nepal. And the second consignment of emergency relief for earthquake-affected families in Nepal has been handed over by India. 9 tons of relief material was transported to Nepalgunj by a special Indian Air Force aircraft. The relief material consists of essential medical and hygiene supplies, tents, sleeping bags and blankets for earthquake-affected families. This is part of the Government of India's efforts to support the Government of Nepal in the wake of the earthquake in Jajarkot on 3rd of November 2023. And Malaysian Foreign Minister Zamri Abdul Kadir, who is on a 2-day visit to India, is scheduled to co-chair the 6th India-Malaysia Joint Commission meeting in New Delhi. The Joint Commission meeting will review the progress of enhanced strategic partnership with Malaysia in the area of political, defence, security, economic, trade and investment, health, science and technology, culture, tourism and people-to-people ties, and will also discuss regional and multilateral issues of mutual interest. Later in the day, Malaysian Foreign Minister will be meeting Indian Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar, followed by a meeting with his Indian counterpart, Dr. S. Jaishankar. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Polling has begun in the northeastern state of India, Mizoram, as the state gears up for state assembly elections. The single-phase polling will have over 8.5 lakh eligible voters that will decide the fate of 174 candidates. Security is tightened as security personnel are on duty at a total of 1,276 polling stations. First phase of polling for the state assembly elections has started in the Indian state of Chhattisgarh too. There are a total of 19 legislative assembly seats in Chhattisgarh, of which 20 seats will be witnessing the polls in the first phase, while the remaining 70 seats will undergo polling on 17th of November. EcoCash, in association with Roots, an environmental organization, organized a natural dyeing workshop in North India's Srinagar on Monday. The workshop aimed to empower local artisans and promoting sustainable fashion by showcasing the use of natural dyes in textile production. Kerala Food Festival, the 7-day extravaganza in South India's Kerala, comes to an end as today marks the last day of the week-long festival. The festival aims to be the biggest celebration in Kerala of not only cultural heritage but also of art and trade, with an attempt to showcase the progress Kerala has made so far. The aim was to present the best of Kerala to the world. And in sports, Australia will square off with Afghanistan in the 39th match of the ongoing ODI World Cup at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai on Tuesday. Australia made a dismal start in the ongoing tournament, suffering defeats in their first 2 games. However, the Pat Cummins-led side staged a stunning comeback, winning 5 games in a row to stake a claim in the top half of the table. A win in the upcoming game will help them secure their spot in the semi-final of the competition. Afghanistan, on the other hand, are coming off with 3 consecutive wins, beating Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Netherlands, and are currently outstanding 6th in ODI World Cup points table. The Hashmatullah Shahidi-led side will eye for a win in their upcoming clash to push for the semi-final qualification. And in tennis, Iga Swiatek regained her full #1 ranking on Monday. Swiatek dominated Jessica Pegula 6-1, 6-0 and won the season-ending WTA Finals in Cancun on Monday. Swiatek ends the season on an 11-match winning streak and will finish the year in the top spot for the 2nd year in a row, having lost the position to Sabalenka after the US Open. 22-year-old Polish tennis star collected 6 out of a total 17 career titles this season as she retained the French Open crown to lift a 4th Grand Slam trophy. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.